Oh hey, if you want to add color and personality and pattern and drama to your space, but you're kind of terrified because you're easily overwhelmed and you don't know where to start, then you're gonna love today's episode. Welcome to Laugh Cry DIY. I am Katie. I am someone who loves color, who loves pattern, and who wants to convert the world to my colorful, patternful, decorating lifestyle. And today, at long last, I am answering humanity's most burning question, which is, how the hell do you create a maximalist space? Now, I know there are people in this world who are intrigued, who are enticed, who are curious about this style, but are also very intimidated by it. So today, I'm gonna break down everything you've ever wanted to know. We're gonna talk about what maximalism is, where it came from, what it requires. I'm also gonna walk you through my step-by-step process to build your dream maximalist room from scratch, including my favorite tips, budget-friendly hacks, and examples for people who want to experiment with maximalism but are absolutely frozen in fear. Yes, this is gonna be a longer episode, but it's gonna be worth it, and I'm very excited, so let's get into it. So first, the big question. What is maximalism? The thesis of maximalism is more is more. It's about drama and excess and creating rich spaces with a lot of visual interest using very intentional design techniques. Which brings us to the main elements of maximalism. And that would be color, pattern, texture, scale, and objects. All of which we will go into later, but to me, in general, maximalism is about creating a joyful space full of things that you love that make your eyes really happy. Now, before we go further, let's talk about the history of maximalism, and let's talk about some of the references that might inspire you as you build your space. So, since day one, historically, maximalism has always been fueled by the elite's desire to flaunt their wealth. You can think about the Baroque and Rococo eras where we had the really gaudy opulence of Versailles, fancy furniture, ornate details, and a lot of high drama. So obviously that was very extreme maximalism coming in the 16th and 1700s. But I think the version of maximalism we often think of today is really what took off in the 1800s in the Victorian era. This is when we started to see luxurious mixes of furniture and wallpaper and textiles. Now obviously people were decorating in this style to flaunt their wealth, but this was also really spurred on by the Industrial Revolution and the mass production of goods, which meant that the middle class could finally afford luxurious items like wallpaper or ornate furniture. The Victorian era was, of course, a time of a lot of colonial activities, so Europeans were also importing a lot of eclectic and exotic items from around the world. So we were seeing things like Persian rugs and chinoiserie and gorgeous hand-painted wallpaper motifs. And we've talked about this on the channel before, but this is also an era where the color green was really popular and it was being used in wallpaper. The only problem was that it was made with arsenic and it was killing everybody. So if you're bored, you can Google Scheele's green and learn more about why Victorians were dying for their wallpaper. And if I'm honest, I would die for this wallpaper too. Now, interestingly, because of all that industrialization and all of that mass production, we saw a new style of maximalism emerge in the Art Nouveau movement in the late 1800s, early 1900s, which was all about artistic craftsmanship and flowing organic lines that would celebrate nature. And this emphasis on craftsmanship was a rejection to the mass production we saw in the Victorian era. Now, fast forward to the Art Deco movement in the 20s. We're post-World War I. We don't want to think about the bloody, boring past. We want the future. We want modernity. So in contrast to the kind of organic flourishes of Art Nouveau, we really moved towards simple, clean lines, symmetry, but adding in luxurious and opulent materials like gold, silver, lacquer, ivory, and other exotic items. And at this time, they were also excavating King Tut's tombs, so we also saw some of this dramatic Egyptian-inspired decor. So ultimately, Art Deco was really about a lot of opulence and luxury, but through a lot of different materials. And that leads me to my favorite expression of maximalism, which is Hollywood Regency. This style was popular in the 30s to the 60s. It was pioneered by Dorothy Draper as well as other people. It was all about showcasing the glamour and opulence in Hollywood. So you had a lot of the opulent materials of Art Deco, but mixed in with bold patterns and colors and really theatrical spaces that really mimicked Hollywood set design. I know that I fell in love with this style because I grew up on MGM musicals, and if you're a fan of classic musicals or classic films from the golden era of Hollywood, oftentimes the lead actress's bedroom or dressing room would be in Hollywood Regency style. And let me tell you, Lola's bedroom in the musical film Damn Yankees is a purple satin dream that single-handedly shaped my entire aesthetic. Now, obviously, Hollywood Regency was a moment in time, and mid-century modern really took over, but throughout the decades, we have seen reinterpretations and reimaginings and resurgences of maximalist style in cool ways. In the 80s, we saw the rise of Miami Deco style. In the 90s, you have the bold colors and graphic patterns of Memphis design. We also saw the rise of shabby chic and super eclectic design in like the 90s. For example, think about the Friends apartment. And today I'm happy to say that we are seeing more maximalist styles come back in the form of Danish pastel as well as grand millennial, which is kind of more grandma core, and I love it. So I wanted to walk you guys through those decades so that you could get a sense of the rich history of maximalism and get some inspiration for how you might want to incorporate any of these styles into your space. Now, before we go on, I do want to talk about the idea of minimalism versus maximalism. If you are someone who is interested but kind of scared of this style, as a culture, we have been brutally brainwashed by minimalist propaganda telling us that our homes should be neutral and blank. I reject this. Ultimately, the preference for minimalism versus maximalism is not about taste or class or money. It's really about how much visual stimulation you desire in a room. Personally, my brain feels crazy in an all white or gray room. But if you have ADHD or you are very easily overstimulated, I completely understand and respect your love of minimalism. But I do have a personal agenda to push more people into colorful maximalism, and here are 3 reasons why. Number 1. The deprivation of sensory stimulation is a torture tactic around the world. It is good and healthy to give your brain things to look at. Number 2, nature is an absolute kaleidoscope of color and pattern and texture. I heard someone say once that if the universe thought there should only be one type of flower, we would only have one type of flower. If you want inspiration, go on a walk and look at the mind-melding combination of color and pattern on flowers and leaves alone. This is what nature wants. And number 3, we have been fed a preposterous idea that a lack of color is the height of sophistication. This is why expensive stores, whether it's decor or fashion, only allow black, white, beige, and gray. Meanwhile, cheap stores are an explosion of color. Why on earth is a dystopian color palette the thing we should aspire to as the pinnacle of taste? Now again, to me, maximalism is a pure delight because it is a powerful way to capture a mood or personality, whether you want to feel like a luxurious starlet or a haunted Victorian ghost child. It's also an easier aesthetic to curate because it's fun and eclectic, and you can mix everything from mid-century to boho to Victorian. This makes it super flexible to mix and match and evolve as your tastes change. It also lets you personalize your space in a major way because you can add your little trinkets and your little fun things and your little hits of whimsy or whatever it is that makes you happy. Okay, rant over. Now let's talk about why maximalism gets a bad rap, understandably. The haters will say that maximalism is clutter and chaos and borderline hoarder behavior. And so what if it is? Look, true maximalism is about curating a lovely space, again, using your design tools. It doesn't have to hurt your eyes and make you feel claustrophobic. It can simply delight and inspire you. Which brings us to the million-dollar question of, how do you create a maximalist room that doesn't feel like cluttered chaos? Here is my step-by-step process. Number 1, choose your design style inspirations. I just gave you guys a mini history lesson about the many iterations of maximalism, but you don't have to stick to those alone. You might like a single style like Victorian, or you might like a few like mid-century and Hollywood Regency and boho. Personally, right now, I am very into Art Deco with a tropical twist. You don't have to totally recreate these styles, but it's good to know what you're drawn to because that'll help you like curate and layer in the right pieces in the room. Number 2, choose your color scheme. Now, obviously color is so fun to play with, and there are a few different kind of angles you can take as you're deciding what your palette's gonna be. You can do monochromatic, where you're using one color in a variety of saturations. This is actually one of the easiest styles to do because you know that no matter what like tone you get of that color, it's gonna work in this space. You can also do analogous colors, which are shades that are close together on the color spectrum. I really love this with like rich jewel tones. Conversely, you can do complementary color shades, where you use opposite shades on the color wheel. It's always easiest to pick 3 colors to start. That's your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary. Tertiary. What a word. You can add even more colors, but having 3 is a good base. And the convenient formula is usually to use 60% of your main color, 30% of your secondary, and 10% of your tertiary as little accents around the room. If you're easily overwhelmed, it really helps to choose at least one dominant color to use throughout the space to tie things together a little more easily. Now, personally, I vote for painting or wallpapering your walls in the dominant color, but you don't have to go that crazy. I really love when you use like the lightest tint of your color. Like I love a light peachy pink wall or a really light blue. I'm also a fan of color drenching, where you drench a whole room in one color, including the ceiling. Although in general, no matter what color you're doing, you want to do your ceiling like 20% lighter. That said, you also don't have to do anything to your walls. Jonathan Adler is famous for creating really colorful maximalist spaces with totally crisp, clean white walls. This is helpful to remember if you're a renter who can't touch your walls at all. All right, number 3, space plan your room and start to source your furniture. Remember that decorating is like baking a cake. You're creating the base and then you're adding in the frosting. One of the biggest mistakes in trying to create a curated maximalist space is trying to make what you fit have just because you have it. That is how you end up with a cluttered, claustrophobic space that doesn't quite work for you. That doesn't mean you can't work with the furniture you have, but think about the paths of travel, think about your functional needs, think about the space you need around objects, then you can loosely map out what type of furniture you need and where you'll put it. Again, this doesn't mean you have to buy all new pieces, but it helps you get inventory of what you have, get an idea of what's missing, and then intentionally source that so that you don't just rush to IKEA, buy something that doesn't fit or doesn't work, and then get stuck with it for the next 10 years. It also helps you get creative with what you have. Maybe you can sell a piece of furniture or flip and reimagine it. When I moved into my apartment, I sold half of my furniture and rebought it in different sizes. Now, the type of furniture you get totally depends on your style, but remember that one of the great things about maximalism is the eclectic nature of it. So getting a mix of furniture in a mix of styles is really gonna help your space feel like cool and curated. Now, an easy hack for curating your pieces as you're sourcing them is to think about opposites in texture and shape. So if you have a simple dining table, maybe you want a super sculptural dining chair. Or if you have a clean bed frame, add a tufted bench. A lot of furniture in a room tends to be very boxy and square, so think about places to add in curved or circular shapes, like round coffee tables or end tables. You can also DIY your furniture to sass things up a little bit. You can swap the style of legs on a sofa and totally change the vibe. You can swap out hardware and make something more ornate or interesting. You also want to think about mixing your materials and textures. So think about combining wood and metallics and lacquer and glass. The more materials and texture you add into a space, the more visually interesting it's going to be. Also think about visual weight around the room. Mix in some pieces that are like light and airier, like rattan or glass, or like this acrylic coffee table. You can also add visual interest in terms of height with furniture pieces. For example, if you use nesting coffee tables or side tables at different heights. Also, any sort of nesting furniture is going to be really helpful for small spaces. And think about how you want to play with color in your furniture too. I absolutely adore a super colorful accent chair or sofa. I also love this plastic purple ottoman. Also think about adding in smaller pieces of furniture, like little side cocktail tables or a little poof or floor pillow. You can tuck these under other pieces of furniture or pop them next to a chair, and it just makes things feel more layered and welcoming and cozy. All right, number 4, create a wow moment. Now in design, we talk a lot about creating a focal point in a room, and a lot of people think of a focal point as an accent wall, but I like to think of a focal point more as just a wow moment in the room. You know, something dramatic that draws your eye. Maybe your wow moment is a really stunning rug or a really bold fireplace. Like maybe it's a colorful sofa. Fun fact, I dyed my own sofa pink in my bathtub. I will link that video below. This is also where scale can play a big role. Like if you have one oversized piece of art, or maybe you do an epic gallery wall, or a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf, or a wallpapered ceiling, or a gorgeous headboard, or an incredible chandelier, or this really epic pink wall paneling. A wow moment can also be something just really unexpected, like a colorful column, or this really cool painted door frame. I did a previous episode on how to add high drama to your decor, so I'll link that below. You can get some more ideas from that too. And last thing I'll say about that is that a wow moment to me is really the thing that like in a room makes you gasp. That might be a beautiful chair you saw in a store or the world's prettiest wallpaper. Oftentimes it's helpful to just like think about what that main element is and then design around it. Alrighty, it's time to add in patterns. Patterns are an essential component of maximalism. Whether you're doing soft florals or tropical patterns or sexy animal print or like bold geometric shapes or a mix of all of them. And you can be really bold with your pattern mixing, or you can be kind of sophisticated and subdued and it still totally works. Now you can generally introduce patterns in a lot of ways. Again, your wallpaper or your furniture, or oftentimes textiles. But of course the question is, how do you mix patterns without them clashing or giving you a headache? Luckily, there are a few hacks here. First, color. Get a few different patterns of throw pillow in the same color family, and no matter the pattern, it's still gonna be cohesive. Number 2, the scale of a pattern. You want multiple sizes in a room. Basically, you always wanna mix a large print, a medium print, and a small print. For example, you can see in this room, they used a lot of different scales. We have a small print on the wall, a large print on the bed, and a medium print on the sofa. Also pay attention to contrast. Good design often combines opposites. For example, if you have a really swirly, round floral print, Pair that with a really crisp geometric pattern. You can see that here where they've added a striped ottoman against this really flowery wallpaper. And you can see it here with this large striped rug paired with these pink snakeskin chairs. I also really like this example where we have 2 colored accent chairs with 2 contrasting black and white throw pillows. It's funky but still cohesive. So really focus on mixing contrasting patterns in different scales. Most importantly though, make sure to mix in solids to give your eye a visual break throughout the room. For example, I love how they paired these patterned curtains with solid velvet curtains just to mix it up. I also want to say that one of my go-to fail-safe hacks is using animal print. Clearly. Animal prints are surprisingly versatile. You can get everything from leopard to zebra to crocodile. And depending on the color or material, they can really fit into any style. If you're intimidated by a lot of clashing patterns, a little hit of animal print in a throw pillow or an ottoman can be surprisingly chic and sophisticated. For example, you can see they used a leopard print pattern rug as a more subtle pattern in this room. And I especially love this tiger striped sofa at the foot of this bed. It totally complements the space, and it is not the type of like skeezy tiger print you think of when you think of tiger print in a bedroom. I'm telling you, in my book, animal prints are basically a neutral, but I really encourage you to play with them in unexpected ways. I also want to say that when you're designing your room and you're looking at all your patterns, think about the patterns you really want to showcase. For example, sometimes people will have a large, beautiful floral rug and they will cover the majority of it with a solid wood coffee table instead of a nice clear glass table, which would let you really see the print. Now, I will say that when we talk about patterns, people do often overlook some really budget-friendly ways to incorporate them into the space. Personally, I love painting patterns on your wall. It's very budget-friendly and you can get really creative. I've painted a full orange geometric faux wallpaper before. I painted a mural in the dining room of an Airbnb. I did a Mondrian-inspired pattern in my friend's basement. I've also used washi tape to create faux wallpaper patterns on walls, which is a great cheap hack if you're a renter. You can also just do cool variations of color blocking in a room. I have to point out this really wild and creative paint job in this room. They used multiple colors and different patterns, but it all really works. One very underrated way to add pattern to a room is to do it with curtains. I've talked about this before. This is a great hack if you can't hang wallpaper because it's too pricey or because you're a renter. For example, you can see how they used patterned curtains behind the headboard in this bedroom. I also did the same thing in an old apartment with a king-size bedsheet. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but I'm a big fan of adding pattern through your furniture. In previous episodes, I made over a beat-up bench by adding a neutral checker pattern. I duped an anthropology dresser by painting a boho pattern on it. I hand stenciled a coffee table for a moody maximalist room. I painted stripes on a thrifted plant stand. I used washi tape on my vanity table as well. I also love wallpapering the back of a bookcase for a little hit of pattern. This is a great economical way to reuse or reimagine a piece for a pretty low cost. I also personally just love having custom things that you couldn't buy even if you wanted to, babe. And not that you asked, but I am currently very much crushing on patterned sofas, which are making a comeback, and I'm really excited to see it. Thoughts on patterned sofas? Baguette? Thoughts on animal print? Love it. For the record, I also love pattern tile on kitchen floors and in bathrooms, and I don't care how it affects the resale value of the home. I think we should live in homes we actually want to live in. Okay, number 6, it's time to add some lighting. Now, you always want multiple light sources in a room, but in a maximalist room, you can really make your lighting as beautiful as any other decor. Whether that's a statement chandelier, or adding lighting above your art, or using luxurious sconces to frame a mirror or a fireplace. Now, the key to lighting a room is really including lighting at different levels in the space. So the easiest kind of hack formula is to have lighting overhead, lighting midway throughout the room via like sconces or lamps, and then small little task lighting here and there. Lighting does a lot to add visual interest and really influences the mood of a room. So think about the styles you really like and look for ways to kind of mix those in. Maybe you want to add some more texture, like with an elaborate Victorian fringe lamp, or maybe you want a more modern feel with some sleek metallic pendants. You might want to incorporate a lamp base with a more sculptural silhouette, or add pattern via more colorful lampshades. In the past, I thrifted a little lamp and painted a fun little pattern on it just to give it some more personality. I've also thrifted lampshades and turned those into fringe chandeliers. And I will be linking all of these videos below. If you're a renter, I'm a big fan of plug-in swag lamps, which are very helpful for functional lighting. They're also a great way to create a vignette. Like if you put a little accent chair and a little drink table and a little swag lamp over that, like boom, instant vibe. And in these very modern times, you can get rechargeable bulbs or you can get remote controlled battery operated bulbs. Pro tip, if you get rechargeable ones or battery operated ones, get two, and that way you always have one that's charging and one that's ready to use when you need to swap it out. And also, please never underestimate the power of candles, especially taper candles, which you can get normal or you can also get battery operated remote ones like I have in my own fireplace. Candles are great because they fit with any style. They add a lot of height interest throughout the room if like one's on a table and one's on a bookshelf. And they can be their own pieces of sculptural art to kind of add interest throughout the room. But I'm telling you, taper candles in particular, they just feel very elegant and luxurious. They also sell these like massively tall taper candles. I'll link them below. They are very dramatic and very extra and very fun. And now that we've lit the candles, let's go ahead and layer in those textiles. Obviously, textiles can do a lot to add pattern and texture into your space, whether that's layering in throw pillows or a throw blanket or a cool rug. And by the way, another great tip I heard is to mix at least 7 textures in a room to make it feel complete. Again, that includes textures in your furniture as well as your textiles. Textiles are a very budget-friendly way to sass things up. For example, if you have a terrible couch that you absolutely hate, throw a beautiful pattern throw on it, cover it in throw pillows, and just mask it. So you can really play around and mix and match and get creative. Some of my favorite hacks are using an unusually shaped rug or a hide. I did this under a dining room table, which is a really unexpected way to cozy up a space. I'm also a big fan of layering rugs. I did this in my own living room with 2 different rugs. You can also see how they combine 2 different styles of rugs in this room. This is also a great hack. If you can't afford the large, expensive rug of your dreams, get the smaller version and just pair it with a cheaper, different rug. You can also use a scarf or small textile on a hallway bench, or use one as like a little table runner, or throw a scarf over a lampshade. I talked about pairing colored curtains and patterned curtains, but you can also add colored or patterned sheers, which can be less overwhelming. I also love color block curtains to kind of mix things up. Another way to zhuzh up your textiles is just to add little trims or details. Like you can add tassels to curtains, or add fringe to a throw pillow, or add a cool trim on an ottoman. And of course, one of my lifelong go-to hacks is just throwing a sheepskin anywhere. Toss it on a chair, toss it on a bed, toss it on a sofa, toss it in front of your fireplace. It's just instantly cozy. But that said, you don't always have to use textiles in traditional ways. You can turn textiles into art with a tapestry on a wall. I framed a vintage scarf for my office makeover. One of my own subscribers, shout out Malia, used a vintage fur jacket over the back of her chair for a pop-up pattern. And think about the really little details in a room. Like I love adding tassels to doorknobs or using fun, colorful curtain tiebacks. Honestly, just know the more textiles you layer into the room, the more cozier and welcoming and happy it's gonna feel. So go nuts. And lastly, it is time to layer in all those little bits and pieces, all those fun little just decorative objects. Again, creating a great maximalist room is not about putting clutter into a space. It's about delightfully curating objects that reflect your life and your personality and your history. But when you're layering in these objects, of course, you want to do this intentionally. So again, think about scale and ornamentation and arrangement. Obviously, there are these standard items you would see in a room, right? Like your vase and your books. But I also love doing funky or unexpected things. Like I love hanging art over a bookcase or adding more art over wallpaper. The designer Danny Daisy did this in her desert house, and it works really well when you keep the art in the same color family. You can also group collections of objects together if you arrange them by like size or by color. Like how gorgeous is this vintage glass collection? To make things feel more cohesive, you can also like corral them on a tray. This is especially smart to do on coffee tables because it just helps things feel a little bit more put together. Also think of ways to use existing items to corral other items. Like you can put perfume bottles or candles on a cake stand or corral jewelry in a tray. And of course you always want to group things in both odd numbers as well as varying heights, just to add that visual variety. On that note, I also have a whole video about how to style a shelf I will link below. It also helps to take a look at your room as a whole to spot any dead spaces that need to be filled, or to look at objects and see if there's a way to kind of zhuzh or make them more interesting. For example, I've remade vases and added more texture, pattern, color, and even mixed up the silhouette. I've done hacks to add more texture to mirror frames. I've made over baskets with trim and tassels. Also remember that your walls don't need to be filled with art if you're someone who hates gallery walls or like me is someone who doesn't really decorate with photographs. You can turn plants into decor to make a really beautiful plant wall. You can also use functional items as art, like when I made this martini-shaped mirror. I also like repurposing or combining the functionality of objects. For example, I use these like sculptural candlesticks as bookends. So there are a lot of unexpected ways to like mix and match and play with things. Also, another way to make things feel less cluttered is to use intentional storage. So like I love a storage ottoman or a bench, especially with a pattern on it. You can use like coordinating boxes, which are really easy to like wallpaper or contact paper. And of course, I'm always obsessed with colorful baskets. And honestly, I think this is one of my favorite things about maximalism is just that you can always play and evolve and mix things around and move things from room to room just to reflect however you're feeling or whatever your taste is at the time. Now, before we go, a few final tips to help you avoid creating the claustrophobic, chaotic, cluttered vibe that everyone hates. 1, use repetition. So repeat patterns or colors or shapes throughout a space to make it feel more cohesive. For example, they did this in an amazing way with the round shapes and colors throughout this room, on the walls, in the lighting, and on the rug. You can also use symmetry to make things feel like cleaner, neater, and more buttoned up, like how they used these 2 bookshelves to frame the piece of art. And even if you're not doing like perfect symmetry, think about visual balance to even things out in the room. For example, like here they use these colorful accent chairs to balance out that large sofa. One of my favorite hacks when you are trying to figure out what a room needs, or when you're trying to spot dead zones, or when you're trying to see like what visual balance might be off, is actually to take a picture of the room and then look at it on the screen. I don't know what it is about visual processing, but for me, being able to look at something on a screen helps me see the gaps and the holes and things that need to be tweaked so much easier. And that, my dears, is how you create a beautiful maximalist space without descending into madness. So I hope you guys found today's video helpful. I hope you got some inspiration. If you yourselves have some really good maximalist tips, please comment them below. I love to hear other people's ideas. And if you use any of these ideas in your own home, please send me pictures because I'd love to creep on those too. Lastly, if you guys like this video, please like, please subscribe. You can also sign up for my newsletter below where I send out a monthly roundup of decor and DIY and inspiration. It's a fun little treat in your inbox if you like that kind of stuff. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for hanging. And most importantly, thank you for joining my militant revolution to bring maximalism back to the masses. Okay, bye. You may leave.